I was suicidal. I ended up in a psych ward because I was convinced I was dying and nobody was listening to me. Somebody with health anxiety, they might think they've got cancer, and then 2 weeks later they think they've got heart disease. And then, so it seems a bit wild to somebody that doesn't understand it. So yeah, it is. It's lonely.
Sherelle, what is health anxiety?
So health anxiety it's honestly a debilitating condition, and I don't think many people understand it. And I think that we all throw around the word hypochondriac, don't we? And don't get me wrong, we can all be like that, but true health anxiety is absolutely debilitating. Essentially, the person is utterly convinced that there's something seriously wrong with them. So usually that's cancer, it could be something wrong with their heart, could be an infection. But the problem is with health anxiety is no amount of reassurance is enough. Like, the person is almost delusional in the sense they're completely convinced. So it's a horrible cycle to get into. And as I said, there's just not that much awareness. So lots of doctors get a bit frustrated because you'll go in saying, I think I've got this wrong. And they're like, well, you don't. And I think these people are seen as being a bit sort of like dramatic and attention seekers, when that's not the case at all. It's a lot deeper than that, I'd say.
Is it mental health illness issue, would we call it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's on the OCD spectrum, really. So we know that with OCD, essentially what's happening is the person has an obsession, and then that leads into like compulsions. So with health anxiety, the obsession is surrounding your health, but then we develop what we call like safety behaviours. So that would be things like check-in, seeking reassurance, Googling, and avoidance, which are like the main 4 problem areas with health anxiety. So like when I had it and it was completely debilitating, it would happen when I had my first child, that's when it started. And I think it was this vulnerability of being a mum of, I need to stay alive now. And I found a little harmless lymph node and boom, thought I was dying. It's listed now, finally, they've sort of like listed it under the OCD spectrum, which I think is great because now it's getting the recognition that I think it needs. But yeah, it's really hard. Like, it completely destroyed me. And I know of so many other people that it's you know, it's not just a bit of like, oh, I'm a bit worried. It's like you're in bed.
All you're thinking of,
Yeah.
It's all consuming.
Yeah.
So you said there, yours was triggered by you having a baby, which I think, you know, many mothers out there would understand that feeling of vulnerability, and, you know, obviously you've got hormones and all sorts of things that are changing, so there's a lot of change going on. But who else could this affect? Why might you develop health anxiety?
So that's a really good question. So do you know what? I've tried to look for themes, and there isn't any, to be honest. Like, it can affect anybody. It doesn't matter where we live, how much money we've got, our circumstances. It can happen to anyone. But I would say that for a lot of these people, there is either some kind of past trauma, so maybe something in their childhood, or something sort of like triggers it. And it doesn't have to be like a health scare per se. It could be having a baby, going through like a marriage breakdown, changing your job, just something where you feel out of control. And then these other worries sort of like just leak in, and before you know, you're sort of like wrapped up in it. So there's normally something, but not always. I've had people come to me and, you know, they're just like, it kind of hit me out of nowhere. The pandemic was a big one though, because all of a sudden we're so vigilant about our health. We've got like the news telling us of this deadly illness. So lots of people now have had health anxiety from that. But not necessarily though, there can be many different reasons why a person can have it. And yeah, it just affects people from like all over the world, which is baffling, isn't it?
Yeah. And how do you decipher whether this is just a general worry, someone worrying about their health or having a genuine concern, to it tipping into anxiety? How can you tell the difference?
So yeah, I mean, I think we're human beings, aren't we? And we all want to live a long time. So lots of us are going to be worried if we think there's something wrong with us. That's totally normal. So most people would be a bit worried if they see a bit of a dodgy mole or something. But I suppose with health anxiety, it's when it's taken over your life and you can't function. So it's kind of like that at that stage where the person might not be taking care of themselves anymore. You know, they can't get out of bed. They're like Googling 24/7. They're at the doctor's like 4 times a week. And that's when you kind of know that it's a bit more than sort of like just being worried. It's like, actually, this has become a genuine obsession now.
Yeah. And how does it differ to general anxiety disorder?
Yeah, so generalised anxiety, I mean, people tend to sort of switch and change what they're worrying about. You know, they might be worried about seeing friends, and then it might be about house fires or whatever. But with health anxiety, it is literally specifically just your health. Like, people don't tend to worry about anything else. It's just anything health, body related. And these people with health anxiety, they're very in tune with their body. So like with me, like I would feel every sensation everywhere. So we end up getting like somatic symptoms, which is another whole story. But yeah, it's just, I guess the health anxiety is the focus on the health and the focus on your body, whereas generalized anxiety is that, well, it's general, you can worry about, I guess, anything.
Yeah.
The theme changes.
That's so interesting there. So you can actually bring on symptoms psychologically by having that worry and having that acute focus on one issue or one perceived issue can then actually bring on like a phantom symptom.
Yeah.
Wow.
That, for me, was the hardest bit of all, because then you're like, is this a real symptom or is it not? And I always remember this one time when I had my little girl, my firstborn, and the midwife just said to me sort of in passing, she said, you've had quite a complicated birth. Just make sure you watch out for blood clots in your leg, because I was in bed for, a couple of days. Now, anyone else would have just taken that information and just thought, yeah, fine, and got on with it. But no, what happened with me is that my leg then began, I was getting pains, it was getting tingly, it felt hot. And I mean like a lot of pain as well, like not just a little bit, I was in a lot of pain, to the point where I ended up seeing the doctor, and the doctor said, yeah, your leg is red, hot and swollen. I think you do have a DVT, like we need to send you for an ultrasound. And I went and had the ultrasound, there was nothing there. And then my leg just went back to normal. And that for me was like a pivotal moment. It was like, oh my gosh, that mind-body connection is powerful.
Yes.
It's insane. It blows my mind. Yeah.
But that's that's a whole other layer of confusion for you, going through health anxiety and then actually feeling symptoms and then having to work out if they're real or not.
Yeah.
It's so full on.
I know.
And you mentioned the word hypochondria or hypochondriac earlier. That was obviously a word that, I would hear that battered around in the 80s and 90s all the time. Does that differ in any way to health anxiety, or have we just changed the name?
We've just changed the name.
Right.
So essentially, I think the reason why it was changed was because I think, just as you said, we throw that word around, don't we? Oh, you're a hypochondriac. And I think it was almost a bit derogative, I suppose, for people that were dealing with it. And to take it more seriously, the name was changed to health anxiety. But in America, they call it sometimes illness anxiety disorder, which same thing. But I'm really glad that they changed it, because if you say to somebody like, oh yeah, I suffer with hypochondria, it doesn't seem quite so serious. It's like, I've got health anxiety. So I think that's why they changed, and I'm glad that they did, because we chuck these words around like, I've got a bit of OCD, I've got a bit of hypochondria, but actually people that have it, and they really have it.
Yeah, it's debilitating.
Yeah.
How bad can it get for people?
I was suicidal. I ended up in a psych ward because I was convinced I was dying and nobody was listening to me. So I was in this, and I, not to big myself up, but I would say I'm a relatively intelligent person, but I could not sort of like hear what my doctor was telling me, and I just lost it. I was just on my knees in A&E, like there's something wrong with me. It was awful. I was away from my two little ones. Me and my husband went through awful times. So it can be debilitating. People are like, they can't go to work anymore. Like they can't take care of their kids. They can't socialize. Like it can destroy a person. So it's really, really awful. And unfortunately, I think doctors just don't understand it that much. So you go to them and you say, I've got health anxiety, and they're just like, oh, well, just stop reading on Google then. But it's a lot deeper than that. Yeah.
And that's why these conversations are important, and the work you're doing, helping other people now with health anxiety, is so important, because I'm imagining it's also a very lonely place to be. You might not know anyone else who's experiencing this. You don't know where to turn to and who to talk to.
Yeah, it is, because you feel a bit wild to say it to people as well. And your loved ones, they do try and understand, like my loved ones did, but they're also seeing a very young, healthy person who clearly doesn't have anything wrong with them, convinced they're dying of like motor neuron disease or something just completely outlandish. But it's very isolating. That's what I struggled with more than anything, to be honest. And that's why I started YouTubing, because I was like, there's got to be other people out there that feel the same way. And it turns out there's lots.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is. It's lonely, it's isolating. You feel embarrassed almost, especially when you jump from one thing to the next. So it's like somebody with health anxiety, they might think they've got cancer, and then 2 weeks later they think they've got heart disease. And then So it seems a bit wild to somebody that doesn't understand it. So yeah, it is. It's lonely.
Isn't it mad that we always assume when we're going through something really challenging that we are the only person on earth going through it? I've had that thought so many times, like, why am I the only person that can't go to sleep normally, or whatever it might be?
Yeah.
And then you just say it out loud and a million other people
They're
go,
like,
me!
Yeah.
It's a wonderful feeling.
It is.
It's a much more sort of connected place to be in, knowing that other people are going through the same and that you can all help each other out.
Absolutely.
It's a good thing.
It is a good thing. I love it. I know.